the garden still, his steps were heavy and slow. Love and a prayer took him there to the place only he could go. Gethsemane.
As a result of that, this professor said if you really want to know the age of this tree, you have to bore into the core of the roots, because those roots have been producing a tree ever since this thing was planted. And it doesn't matter how many times the trunks have died off, new shoots will come out of those roots. So you need to know to the core of them. So they went born into two trees. They got permission on it. It was a 1 centimetre thick bore, one another big one. And they got permission to do it in two places. And he dated it to over 2,200 years old.
Wow.
200 years
Yeah.
old.
Wow.
So the roots here were here holding a tree up when Jesus was in Gethsemane. Is this the Garden of Gethsemane? 4th century it was marked. How do we know? 350 years after Christ it was marked, but it had to be the bottom of the hill. And olive presses were found along here in the excavations. So it's as good a candidate as any.
Yeah.
So you are in the Roman Catholic Garden of Gethsemane because it's open to the public. Over the wall is another one that they own. Beyond that is the Greek Orthodox Garden of Gethsemane, and off to the left is the Armenian Garden of Gethsemane.
Everybody understands.
But the oldest trees are here. So, that's the best argument. The ancient, how ancient trees are. Sorry, but 4th century tradition was here.
Shalom, shalom, Jerusalem. Peace be to you. When Messiah comes to take us home, may his praise be found in you. Pray for peace, Jerusalem.
Completely refurbished by the Maccabees, and that's then torn down, and the new building, which will be built by Herod, is double the size, the height of Solomon's temple, but that's also on that foundation stone. That gets destroyed by the Romans. The Byzantines want to maintain the whole Temple Mount as a pile of rubble to perpetuate Jesus' prophecy of not one stone remaining upon another. And so when the Muslims come, they've got carte blanche, there's nothing to bother them, and they build this Dome of the Rock. But compare the size of the Dome of the Rock to the Temple of Herod. 50 feet taller, Herod's temple. There's nothing up there. They built the Dome of the Rock. I think that the Muslims coming from the Arabs knew how to build an 8-sided suspended dome. They never built anything like that. They only saw them at the Egyptians. So they got the Byzantine architects to build it for them. They built that to commemorate the binding of Ishmael in the year 691. And they named the mosque the Al-Aqsa, meaning the distant. In the 17th surah of the Quran. By the way, how many times is Jerusalem mentioned in your Bible?
We don't know.
Hundreds of times. How many times is Jerusalem mentioned in the Quran? 0. It's not relevant. He flies, called Al-Burak, the light. He flies through the night sky. He comes down somewhere, which is referred to as Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, the distant mosque. So where is the distant mosque? The Al-Aqsa. Masjid Al-Aqsa. According to early Muslim scholars, it's a place called Tayyaf, destroyed by earthquake in 749. Never rebuilt. You may have been promised to get bankrupt except in Spain. Blank, mess, rubble, everything. We finished built fortresses all the way around the city of Jerusalem. Built houses in between them to make walls. They took marble from the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They built themselves the Church of the Knights Templar. Stuff over there. The Church of the Knights Templar. They conquered the city in 1186 in the summer. We removed all the statues from that church, covers up all the icons in the church, and rededicates it as the new Al-Aqsa. So the place that's referred to as being the third holiest site in Islam is actually the Crusader Church, dedicated to the Knights Templar.
May his praise be found in
This was Herod's palace. Okay, this is the first wall of the city built. That's the Kidron Valley, Temple Mount. Okay, City of David, Siloam Pool, Bethesda Pool over here, Pool of Israel over there. This was the city until 22 BC. What the Maccabees had built around this wall. This is the Ben Hinnom Valley. Ben Hinnom Valley, Kidron Valley, Temple Mount. You get the picture? This was the first wall that went along this transverse valley. It was raised up on a rock so that people couldn't put battering rams and knock the walls down along here. Herod built an extra neighborhood across the central valley, down here like that, leaving the pool that Hezekiah had built outside the wall. So we are here. The earliest Christians that came into this city, we're talking about before Helena, Constantine's mother, would do a procession, and that procession would begin in Gethsemane over here. Then they would come this way, past the temple. They would come to a place where they called Peter in Gallicantu, which they claim was the high priest's house, but it wasn't. It was nowhere near it, over here. And then they come down to here. For two reasons. Number one, the Praetorium, Herod's palace. This is where the trial took place. And from there, they would do the walk out to the place where the Holy Sepulchre is built over a quarry, which they refer to as Golgotha, over there. So it's about where he's actually carrying his cross is a very short distance. It's about 170, 180, depends if it was straight back then, maybe 200 yards. Then all their followers will be terrified. We do it in order to take out the leadership and make the other people fear. We leave the people on the cross, their bodies to rot and be eaten by wild birds to further humiliate them. And we do it at eye level so that people can see the suffering in their face, or there's no point. So if you imagine the hill of Calvary, right? Find me, most of you know your Bibles pretty well. Find me in one of the four Gospels, just one mention of a hill. You won't. It doesn't exist. It's a medieval fantasy. And one of the things about understanding Jerusalem is divorcing yourself from medieval and Byzantine fantasy and connecting to the reality of the Roman world and the reality of the Jewish world in Judea ruled by Rome. And it's not what people have been imagining it to be for thousands of years because they've never studied it. Today we've got the archaeology to back it up, we've got the records of people, we've got the writings of Romans, of Jews. We can get more into detail and understand more about it. But in the Middle Ages people were ignorant. If they'd ever read a book, it was maybe Chaucer or the Bible, and that's it. And that was bad translation. So you are possibly in the area where the trial took place. That's why I brought you here, because this is a very early tradition. Talking about second, third century tradition. That this is the place roughly where it was. The Armenians built their cathedral here. They were already here about the year 200, and then monasteries around it. So add it in just so you know, if you want to be where the trial took place. It's all built up. The palace was knocked to the ground, all built up. This is about as close as we could be to where the spot was. And if we found the paving stones, it's down under here. Gabbatha is down under here somewhere. and Hezekiah. That's it. Josiah is killed stupidly in 605 BC because he decides to go and pick a fight with Pharaoh. When Pharaoh says to him, Josiah, what are you doing here? This is not your battle. Go home. He removed the high places, broke down the pillars, cut down the Asherah, broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made, until the days the people of Israel had made offerings to it. It was called the Nehushtan. He trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel, so there was none like him among all the kings of Judah after him, nor among all those who were before him. For he held fast to the Lord. He did not depart from following him, but he kept the commandments that the Lord commanded Moses, and the Lord was with him whenever he went out. He prospered. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and would not serve him. He struck down the Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory, from watchtower to fortified city. In the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hoshea son of Elah, king of Israel, Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, came up against Samaria, and he besieged it. And at the end of 3 years he took it. In the 6th year of Hezekiah, which was the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel, Samaria was taken. The king of Assyria carried the Israelites away to Assyria and put them in Halah. If we claim this, if the Judeans are claiming that they failed in the siege of Jerusalem, that's like encouraging ourselves. What about if the Assyrians write about it themselves? Would that be fair proof? External source? So French archaeologists digging at Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, in 1946-47,
This is the Kotel.
discovered a prism in the king's palace. And the prism in the king's palace that was like this big had on it the annals of the king of Sennacherib of Syria. And what does he say? He says like this, and I conquered Gaza, and I conquered Ashkelon, and I conquered Ashdod, and I conquered Ekron, and I conquered Gath, and I conquered Gezer, and I conquered Lachish, and I conquered Azekah, and I conquered Marisha, and I conquered Bet Shemesh, and he goes on and on and on. 46 Judean cities he conquered, plus all the Philistine cities. And then at the end of this inscription he says, and I locked up Hezekiah in his city like a bird in a cage. What's he admitting? He failed to conquer Jerusalem, that King Hezekiah was the king that stood up to him, and that they failed. That's an external source proving the biblical story, which is pretty cool. Okay. People change with us all the time. There's no reason. So there's just one step going in, then we're on the flat pretty much. Remember what I told you about how the Romans described the crucifixion takes place at eye level? So the earliest tradition, if you look at this is Crusader, it's got pointed arches. They built it because they had to get a platform there to get people on top of the rock because they had to create a hill. Okay? Even though there is no hill in the Bible. This is round. It was damaged, it was smashed to pieces by the Persians. It was replaced cheaply using ceramics here and here. But it's a semicircular Roman arch. It is not a pointed Gothic arch. It's not medieval. This is where the original chapel was. This is where they worshipped as being the site of the crucifixion. Pointing out that the rock behind has a crack in it, which was claimed to come from the earthquake which takes place when Jesus leads them on the cross. Again, this is, I wasn't here. I can't say that was the one. I can't say that's it. What I'm telling you is that this is the earliest place that was ever revered as the site of the crucifixion. Not the top of the rock that the Crusaders built on, because there is no hill. Let's continue round to the right. They point to this and say, the rock that the builders set aside became the foundation stone. Okay? Behind these walls here, you can't see because the Crusaders were there. By the way, these mosaics on the floor of this Armenian church, they are depictions of the 9 cathedrals in which hundreds of Armenians were burned to death by the Turks in the 1930s. The Republic of Turkey was founded. Whitest limestone in the entire district of Jerusalem. The same way down here, Herod chopped lumps of rock out of here. Look, you can see where they were cut out. Cuts, 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 cuts. Look up there, more of them. It's all quarry. And what they did is they would keep going and going and going, looking for the whitest stone like that. So, I'm not going to go into all the story of the cross down here. It's not that important to us, to you, rather. What I want to show you is something else. Behind this wall, about 12 feet behind that lady's head, to the back, about 12 feet behind there, there's an inscription and a diagram, which is more significant, I think, than anything else in this church. Because what I wanted to understand is what happened in this spot. So what happened in this spot is that this site was where I showed you outside the walls, and people were coming here to worship. People were coming here to pray for a long time. If Jesus is crucified somewhere like 33, round about that, we don't know the exact date, he was crucified. And Jews were still in this city until the 70s, and then they came back. Some of them came back secretly. They were only allowed on the day of the destruction of the temple to come back here. People were secretly praying here. After the Roman legion had finished the conquest of Jerusalem, Jews were sneaking back because the Roman city hadn't been built yet. And they were praying at this spot. So Hadrian, Emperor Hadrian, in the year 130, came to this city, and he brought 2 oxen, big oxen, and a chariot, and attached a plough to it, and went and did a perimeter on the rubble of the city. That's how Roman cities are founded. The emperor has to follow a chariot led by bulls, not horses, and a plough behind it, and does a circle. Why? Because that's how the story goes, that Rome was founded by Romulus and Remus. And then you're forming what's called a Roman Colonia. So we have an inscription that was found later on in the north, and it commemorates the visit of Emperor Hadrian in the year 130, the second year of his consulship, the 16th year as his 14th year as emperor, to found the new city named for him as a god, Ilium. and also for the name of Jupiter, Capitolina. Capitoline Hill is where the temple to Jupiter was in Rome. So he's founding it. They would embroider it on their clothes. They would tattoo it on their wrists as a sign of being Christians. Then when Hadrian makes all the measures against Christians, when he became declared Christian in Hadrian's days, because he was trying to stop the spread of the church, that fish would be a death sentence. That fish would see you thrown to the lions. That fish would see you in the arena. So what do? You don't want to have a fish on you. Just say you're a new Christian. You don't want to have a fish on yourself because you know that's a death sentence. What do they start to use from Hadrian onwards as the symbol of Christianity? The fishing boat. Like we saw in the Galilee, because 7 of the disciples were fishermen. It's not specifically Christian. You couldn't say, oh, they're Christian, they've got a fishing boat. It's got a fishing boat. Marked by the fishing boat. It was like more nondescript. It was a way of escaping the horrible measures of Hadrian. So, what was the language the Christians spoke in this region of the Eastern Roman Empire? The Gentile Christians, what did they speak? Greek, no Aramaic. Nobody speaks Greek. So, if you're a Christian and you've come to Jerusalem in Major, and you want to scratch something on a wall somewhere, what would you leave? It's the years 130, 120, 35, 136, after the war with the Jews, the second war with the Jews, Bar Kokhba revolt. You might scratch a symbol of a fishing boat, and you'd write in Greek, right? Yes. Logic. What about an inscription in childlike Latin under a fishing boat? No one spoke Latin in this city. This lifetime, saving up and finally getting here. So they see the sign of the crucifixion, they see the sign of... he takes the Roman eagle and he gives it an extra head. Can you guess why that is?
I don't know.
Because he's now setting himself up after he manages the Council of Nicaea. He sets himself, the Roman eagle has one head. Look what he's done. He's now given it 2 heads. One represents the empire, the other one represents the church, the Roman church. And who is the crown over both of them? Constantine himself. He's the head of the church and he's the head of the empire. The problem with that is as soon as you put church and state together, as soon as the state starts to collapse, the church goes down the pan with it. I'll show this as an example of the type of tomb that you saw a little bit on the Mount of Olives. Okay, it's the exact type of tomb that is described in John's Gospel when Peter and John are rushing to the tomb, and John gets in there first, and Peter comes out. Then Mary Magdalene stooping to get into the tomb. So when this gentleman lit his candle, you'll be able to see behind him there are 2 empty tombs in there. But come this side, there are 2 sealed tombs in there that have still got bodies in them. Altogether, around the outside of this big round building called the Rotunda of the Resurrection, there are over 30 tombs like these. Particular, specific, 1st century, cheap, quick, quarry-based Jewish Kuchin tombs. Because that is the sort of tomb that Jesus was laid in. No big chamber that you can walk in, but where you have to stoop. There, you see that? Just as I described, you can see it's about 2 meters long, 1 meter high, half a meter wide. 4 amot, 2 amot, 2 cubits, 4 cubits, 1 cubit. And then you cover it with a stone like that one.
So you just put the head like that?
Right in, head first, laid in there, yes, feet out. Feet on the edge.
So when you
Because
check
if they're reviving,
yeah, you
then
pull
they
it.
can pull the linens off their face, they can still breathe because there's air coming in around the stone. You don't seal the stone until you're sure the person's dead. Can you go inside? We can all have a look inside. Recently I saw another one of these chapels.